The mountains of Colorado did not forgive, especially in February. The wind came without sound, like something ancient had stirred in the pines. The snow that morning had been light, even pretty. By afternoon, it fell sideways, thick and heavy, swallowing roads and signals and logic. The forecast had promised mild weather, but the mountain did not care. Carter Hale lived alone in a weather-beaten cabin just off Coldridge Ridge, 6 miles above the last gas station, and even farther from people. He fixed gear for hikers and taught summer survival classes at the local campgrounds. No internet, no social media, no deliveries past the broken fence. He liked it that way. The Army had taken most of his 20s and something else he never found a name for. Silence felt like the only thing that ever of anything back. That evening, Carter had just poured himself a bowl of canned stew when he heard it. A sound out of place. Metal, ice, a tree cracking. He grabbed his coat flashlight and emergency bag before he could even think. He moved through the whiteout like he had done in combat, without hesitation. The snow had almost erased the path down to the old access road, but he saw it. A black SUV nose down in a drift. One tire still spinning, inside a figure pressed against the window. A woman. She looked up when his light hit her face. She was trying not to panic, and failing. The back door was stuck. He had to break the side window with the butt of his hatchet. She flinched hard, coughing into her scarf. "My leg," she whispered, shaking. "It's stuck." Carter didn't speak. He just climbed inside and freed her foot gently, then lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. He carried her through knee-deep snow breath, short, pulse steady. She never stopped apologizing, not with words, but with her silence, with the way she clung to his coat like she wanted to disappear. In the cabin, Carter lit the stove and draped blankets over her. She was shivering too hard to hold the mug of tea he made, so he held it for her. Her hair was damp, stuck to her cheek. Her boots were Italian leather. Her gloves had initials embroidered in gold thread. She didn't belong here. He didn't ask why she was alone. Not yet. "You got a name?" he asked quietly, not looking at her. "Avery," she said after a pause. "All right, Avery, I'm Carter." She gave a small nod. "Thank you, Carter," she murmured, her eyes closing. "You're not dying in my cabin," he said half to himself, "so don't even think about it." She drifted in and out of sleep, and Carter stayed by her side the entire night. When she moaned, he was there. When she cried in her sleep, he held her hand. When she quieted, he checked her pulse, told stories about pine trees and coyotes and a raccoon that once stole his entire dinner. By dawn, the storm hadn't eased, but her fever had. Carter had no idea who she was, and she had no idea that in the months to come, this night would change both of their lives. Forever. By midday, the snowfall had stopped. The world outside was silent, almost too quiet, like it had forgotten how to breathe. A sheet of white stretched across the land, softening every edge. Avery stood near the window, wrapped in a wool blanket Carter had given her. Her injured leg was swollen, but no longer pulsing with pain. She had barely spoken since she woke. "You'll need to stay off that leg," Carter said, as he poured boiling water over dried herbs. "Tendons look stressed, maybe torn. You're lucky it wasn't worse." Avery nodded, her expression unreadable. "I need to leave," she said. Her voice was low, but her words were firm. Carter didn't argue. He didn't ask why she had been driving a luxury SUV up a mountain road alone in the middle of winter. He didn't ask why her phone had no service but no emergency contacts either. He had grown up in a world where people ran from things they never talked about. So he only said, There's a ranger outpost 5 miles downhill. I'll take you as far as my snowshoes can manage. Radio might be working by now." She nodded. "Thank you. For everything." They left before dusk. Carter rigged a sled from an old sheet of plywood and 2 climbing ropes. Avery lay bundled silent, watching the trees blur by as he pulled her across the frozen slope. When they reached the ranger station, it was empty. But the solar radio flickered to life after Carter adjusted the panel. A helicopter was dispatched before nightfall. As the sound of blades thundered in the distance, Avery sat upright and pulled something from her coat pocket. "I don't have anything else to give you," she said, pressing a small leather case into his hand. "You don't need to." "Please," she interrupted. He looked down. Inside was a simple brass compass. No markings but a tiny carved mountain symbol in the corner. "That's yours?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, now it's yours." She climbed into the chopper without another word. She didn't say her full name. Didn't turn around. Carter stood in the snow long after she disappeared into the clouds. The compass was warm in his hand. 3 months passed. Then 6, then 9. Carter never heard from her. He didn't tell anyone about the woman in the snow or the compass. He went back to repairing snow gear and teaching kids how to build fires without matches. But at night, in the quiet moments, he would take the compass out and hold it. Not to find direction, but to remember what it felt like to matter to someone, even just for a night. Until one morning the mail carrier dropped off a package. No return address. Inside was a hardcover book. The title, "North of Here, A Story of the Cold Ridge Rescue." Carter stared at it for a long time. Then he opened to the dedication, "To the man who reminded me that safety is not always found in escape. Sometimes it is found in presence. A.L." His fingers froze on the initials. Avery. She had not forgotten. The book sat on his kitchen table for nearly a week before Carter opened it again. He read a few pages at a time, each word stitched with cold and clarity, and something else he couldn't quite name. It wasn't a memoir. Not exactly. It read like fiction, but the mountain setting was too familiar. The cabin, the rescue, even his fire-scorched stovetop had been painted in words. The man was unnamed throughout. Just the stranger on the ridge. But he knew. She had written him into every paragraph. The next week, Carter drove into Glen Haven to return a borrowed axe sharpener. He stopped by the small bookstore just to get out of the cold. There, stacked in the front window, were 3 copies of North of Here, and a poster taped beside them. Book Talk author A.L. Wells. One night only, Denver Public Library, Friday 7 p.m. Wells. Not Avery. But Carter wasn't surprised. The initials matched. The silence matched. The way she had looked at him like a person she didn't expect to need. He folded the flyer slowly, tucked it into his coat, and didn't say a word to the clerk. That Friday, Carter found himself sitting in the back of a large glass-paneled library in Denver, far from his cabin, far from the place where everything had once felt simple. The room was packed, mostly women, young professionals, readers. Some fans had tears in their eyes before the author even stepped on stage. And then she appeared. Not in designer clothes, no heels, no makeup thick enough to cover who she really was. Just a gray sweater, jeans, and hair pulled into a soft braid over one shoulder. She looked the same, except this time she looked like she belonged. When Avery A.L. Wells spoke, her voice was clear, steady, and warm. "I wrote this book because someone once saved my life," she said. "Not just my body, my direction." He didn't ask who I was. He didn't need to. He just stayed. The room was silent. Carter stared at the floor. I had spent so much of my life running, she continued. Even success became another version of escape. But sometimes, the people who live the quietest lives are the ones who hear the world most clearly. Applause followed. Not loud, not frenzied, just honest. He didn't approach her after the event. Didn't need to. She saw him. From across the room, her voice faltered mid-sentence to a fan. Her eyes widened. For a breath, she forgot what she was saying, but she didn't move toward him. And he didn't move toward her. Just a nod. Quiet. Deep. Recognition without the need for words. That night he returned to his cabin. The wind howled again, but it wasn't angry this time. It just moved like breath. He opened the compass for the first time since the helicopter left. The needle spun once, settled north. But for the first time, Carter felt like he didn't need it to find his way. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in Carter's postbox. Handwritten. No stamp, no return address. Just his name on the front. Inside was a single page. Carter. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure I deserved it if you did. But I saw you, and that was enough. I wrote that book to remember what it felt like to be safe, not just from the storm, but from myself. I thought you should know. The foundation it funded the workshops we're building in rural mountain towns, the survival kits in libraries, they all started with what you did that night. You never asked me why I was driving up that mountain. Maybe someday I'll tell you. Or maybe you already understand. I don't expect anything. Just wanted you to know. The stranger on the ridge saved more than one life. Avery Carter read it once, then again, and then carefully folded it and tucked it into the back of north of here where the dedication had once made him stop breathing. He didn't write back. He didn't know how. But the following Saturday, during his wilderness class with the local kids, a black SUV appeared at the edge of the trailhead. Same as before. No noise. No announcement. Avery stepped out, wearing hiking boots, a borrowed parka, and a wool hat that made her look impossibly young. She didn't say a word. Just sat quietly on the edge of a log, watching as Carter taught the children how to tie a proper figure-8 knot. When one of the kids struggled, Avery walked over, knelt beside her, and said softly, "Here. Let me show you." No one asked who she was. She just belonged. That evening, Carter made stew and she offered to chop the onions. They moved around the kitchen like a memory already lived, silent, easy, unspoken understanding. When the meal was done, they sat on the front steps of the cabin, looking out over the trees as dusk turned the snow to gold. Finally, Carter said, "Why did you come back?" Avery didn't answer right away. Then, because I didn't know how to ask to stay. He nodded slowly. And now, she looked at him. Now I know I don't have to. There was no declaration, no music, no cinematic kiss. Just two people sitting close in the stillness of the ridge, understanding that not all returns are loud. Some are just real. For the first few weeks, Avery came every Saturday, not as a guest, not as a visitor. She just came. She helped the kids put together first aid packs, taught them how to read cloud patterns, and took notes when Carter explained the signs of a coming avalanche. They didn't talk about the night of the storm. They didn't talk about the book or her real name or the compass. It was enough somehow just to be. Until one morning, a truck rolled into the trailhead carrying a pair of corporate representatives from a Denver-based environmental firm. They came with clipboards, pre-approved blueprints, and confident smiles. Carter noticed Avery's face stiffen the moment they introduced themselves. Wells Development Group 1 said, "We've partnered with a foundation that secured rights to survey this land. Plans for a winter training center, state-of-the-art." Avery stayed quiet, her hands clenched in her coat. The man continued, "Of course, we'll be phasing out existing structures. The cabin, the trails, it'll all be updated. Fresh start." Carter looked at Avery, then at the man. "No," Carter said flatly. "This isn't just forest. It's community." The man smiled wider. "We understand. That's why the foundation chose this place. Someone very high up approved the project. Personally." That night after the men left, Carter didn't go back to the cabin. He sat by the fire pit behind the supply shed chopping kindling. The axe fell harder than it needed to. Avery found him there just after sundown. She didn't speak at first. Then softly, "I didn't know they would come here. Not like this." He stared at the blade in his hand. "But they did." She took a step closer. "I funded the foundation." "That part is true, but the expansion, they went ahead without telling me. I swear, Carter." He stood up, not angry, not loud, just tired. "You wrote about remembering, about staying. But this feels like you're erasing everything you claim to care about." Her eyes shimmered in the low firelight. "I'm trying to build something that lasts." He shook his head. "This place already lasts. You don't have to carve your name into it to make it matter." She left before sunrise. Didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye. Carter watched the SUV drive away, headlights slicing through the mist like memories too sharp to forget. The silence returned, but this time it didn't comfort. A week passed. Then 2. The SUV didn't return. Neither did a letter or a call. The kids asked where she'd gone, but Carter only said she had something to take care of. He didn't mention the developers. He didn't mention the way she'd looked at him before leaving, like a door had closed that neither of them knew how to reopen. He resumed the Saturday classes alone. The laughter still came, but the stillness between felt longer now, heavier. At night, the book still sat on his shelf. The compass was still in his coat, but neither felt like they meant the same thing. Then one snowy morning, a package arrived. No return label. Again. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. Worn edges, ink smudged in corners. A ribbon bookmark tucked between 2 pages near the middle. It wasn't published, not polished, just handwritten. The first entry was dated the day after she left the ridge. "I said I wanted to build something that lasted, but I think I just wanted proof that I mattered. And maybe I thought Carter would understand that, until I realized he already did. And I never asked what mattered to him." The notebook spanned months. Sketches of the cabin, notes from Carter's lessons, drawings of the children tying rescue knots with crooked fingers, and scattered between the entries truths she had never said aloud. How she'd driven up the mountain that night, not to visit anyone but to leave something behind. A resignation letter. A laptop full of contracts. The final draft of a life she no longer believed in. And then the crash. The storm. And Carter. One line was underlined twice near the final pages. "He never asked for anything, but gave me everything I didn't know I needed." Carter closed the notebook slowly, then sat in his chair holding it to his chest like it might steady something inside him. He didn't cry, but he also didn't move. Not for a long time. That afternoon, he packed a small bag and drove. When he reached Denver, he didn't stop at the foundation or the development firm. He went to a quiet corner of the city, a community center with a new survival program painted on the door. Inside, in a classroom filled with boots and tarps and maps, Avery stood beside a whiteboard helping a group of teenage girls lace together emergency packs. She looked up, saw him. Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. And neither did he. Until the students left. "I got your notebook," Carter said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd read it," she whispered. "I wasn't sure I was ready to." He looked around the room. "This what you're doing here, it's good," he said. "But if it costs you the places that shaped you, is it still you?" Avery took a slow breath. "I shut down the project. The one on the ridge," she said. "It wasn't mine to build. I think I finally understand that." He nodded. "Thank you." They stood in the middle of the quiet room, not as strangers anymore, but as people who had broken something and were now trying to find out if it could be rebuilt. "I don't want you to disappear again," he said. "I don't want to," she replied. 2 weeks later, the ridge thawed. Spring came late to Coldridge, sneaking up through melting snowbanks and pine needles. The creeks began to murmur again. The trail markers reappeared. And so did Avery. This time she didn't arrive in an SUV. She hiked. Her boots were worn, not expensive. Her pack was small-weathered. Her eyes were steadier now, not lost, not guarded, just present. Carter was rebuilding the trail bridge near the northern bend when he saw her walking up the slope, her jacket zipped to the collar, hair pulled back beneath a knit cap. She stopped when she saw him. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said. "I was wondering when you would," he replied, standing with a hammer still in his hand. She smiled. Small. Real. That evening they sat outside the cabin watching the last snow patches melt beneath the trees. Avery poured tea from the pot she'd brought in her backpack. She added honey without asking, like she remembered. They didn't talk about the past anymore. They talked about now. About how she was launching mobile workshops instead of buildings. About how Carter had started gathering more kids from farther towns each Saturday. About how small things like knowing when the creek would swell or how to tie a knot were often what saved people in the end. And then quietly, about something neither of them had dared say. "What would it look like?" she asked, eyes on her mug. "If I stayed." Carter didn't look away. "It wouldn't look like a foundation," he said. "Wouldn't look like a speech or a storybook. It'd look like this." He gestured to the woods, to the logs, to the path behind them. It'd look like showing up, over and over. Later that night, Carter reached into the small drawer near his bed. He pulled out something carved from wood, soft with age. A simple ring. Bay cedar. Etched inside, barely visible in the firelight. One word, stay. He didn't offer it with ceremony, just held it out in his open palm. Her breath caught, but she didn't cry. She only nodded, then slid the ring onto her own finger. There was no wedding, no announcement, just a promise in how they woke early each morning and worked side by side. Avery helped Carter remap flood zones and distribute gear. He helped her draft simple brochures in plain language for families who had never seen a mountain, let alone prepared for one. They never used the word love. Not at first. They just kept returning. And sometimes returning is the most sacred form of love there is. By the time summer touched the ridge, something new had grown, not loud, not fast, but steady. The old ranger station had been converted into a learning shelter. No screens, No signs with names or logos, just hooks lined with backpacks, boots arranged in muddy rows, and a long corkboard tacked with maps, scribbled notes, and crayon drawings from kids. At the bottom of one picture, a crooked pine tree and two figures standing beneath it, was a note written in a child's blocky handwriting. "Thank you for keeping us safe." On the day of the shelter's opening, there was no ribbon cutting. Carter wore his usual flannel. Avery brought lemonade and passed it out in reused paper cups. The kids were the ones who spoke, telling stories about what they'd learned: how to build a signal fire, how to read animal tracks, how to stay calm in a storm. The parents cried quietly behind sunglasses, and Avery, standing just behind Carter, said nothing. She only rested her hand gently at the middle of his back, like an anchor. That evening, as the sky burned soft orange over the trees, Carter and Avery walked to the edge of the ridge, the same place where her SUV had once gone off course, where the storm had first rewritten everything. The wind was calm now. She leaned against the wooden railing Carter had rebuilt himself. "I used to think stories were about endings," she said. "Clean ones, neat ones." And now he asked. She turned to him. "Now I think they're about what stays." Carter reached into his coat and pulled out the brass compass. He placed it in her hand. "I think you dropped this," he said. She laughed softly, holding it close. "I think I was always meant to find my way back here," she whispered. They stood in silence as the last light fell through the trees. No vows, no speeches, just presence. And in that stillness, something unspoken settled between them. Not the beginning of a love story, but the continuation of one. And so it was. A woman who had once driven into a storm to disappear found herself not in the world she built with money or titles, but in a cabin, a trail, a child's drawing tacked to a wall. A man who thought his quiet life meant little learned that sometimes the smallest kindnesses echo the longest. And somewhere on a quiet ridge where the wind once howled and the snow once buried the roads, a compass pointed not north but home.